Alrighty, so guys, like we were talking about, we have four concepts down with us, right? We got variables, HTML buttons, we got functions, and now we got conditionals all in our bucket or like our bag of tricks with coding. So it looks like we didn't have any questions. If you do guys have any questions, feel free to chat them or unmute, and I'd love to answer. But now I think it's a good transition for us to sort of start utilizing the stuff we learned over the past 2 weeks and see how can we translate it into something cool. And that something cool is going to be our project. Now, this project, guys, is going to be something which we're going to work on with the rest of the time today, talking about what it is, getting started with this, setting it up, and then working on it diligently over these next 2 weeks of the summer as well. So let's talk about what is this project going to entail. So with these next 2 weeks, we're going to be creating a mini project, you can think about it, and it's going to be a advanced quiz game in the sense that these are the details. The user is going to be asked 5 to 10 questions, and the user is going to have to answer the question, see if they're right or wrong, and then the user's score will be changed. That's the program, that's that project in a nutshell. However, as you guys can see right here, here are much more of the technical aspects of the project. So the questions which the user has to answer, we're going to be holding them in a variable. Can anybody think about what format? What is the cast? What is it going to be? Is it going to be a number variable or a string variable? The questions. String, exactly. Yep, it's going to be a string variable. We're going to hold the questions in a string. Then we're going to use conditionals to see if the user answered the question correctly or incorrectly. We're also going to write some good code, which is going to house all of our code, and that's something that's going to be utilizing functions. Then we're going to set up a text box and a button for users' input. That's where all the user input is going to occur. And then lastly, we're going to be using 2 more concepts of variables in the sense that we're going to use a variable to keep track of the user score. And then we're going to make the whole interface look really nice using some CSS and styling. Now, this relates to the concepts of the 3 main files we talked about last week. The HTML is used to structure the whole website. The CSS is used to make the website look nice and pretty and all that. And then the JavaScript is all the brains of the operation. It is where we're going to write all of our code to handle the conditionals and the variables. So, anybody have any questions of what we'll be talking about, what we'll be doing with this project, guys? No, Ayush, everybody understand? It's a basic quiz game. We're going to see if the user's right or wrong and update it and see how well they are doing. Alrighty, so it looks like everybody here is good to go. So what we're going to do now, guys, is head on over to our coding website, which we introduced last week. The website link I'm going to drop in the chat so that everybody can join on in at jsfiddle.net. So I'll give everybody a quick minute to get on there. And as you guys go onto the website, guys, I did talk about last week that it is a good idea to sign up and make an account, because then you're able to save all of your progress, save all of your code in a nice way so that you can access it in the future. So I'll give you guys a quick minute there to get onto the website and create an account if need be. And if you guys are having any trouble getting onto the website, guys, as always, feel free to unmute. And once you guys are on the website, guys, give me a quick little chat or unmute. Let me know that you are actually on the website. All right, Maha, you're on. Yusuf, Rashid, and Ayush, you guys good? Awesome, awesome. All right. So, guys, as I talked about earlier before we got started today was, as I'm going to start coding now this project, right? We're going to follow along. I'd highly recommend one of 2 options. Either one, you split screen so you have my Zoom on one end and then the code on the other, or if possible, have two devices, like an iPad on one hand where you're joining a Zoom meeting, and on the laptop, you're following along. Either way it works, whatever is better for you, either way works. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is also drop the link of my code if you just want to follow along. But as always, I do recommend typing it out. Is always a much better idea because then you actually get a sense of what is going on. So here is my link in the chat. If you want to just follow along and see what I'm doing. Alrighty. So for today, guys, we're going to get started off with essentially the structurizing of the website, of the project, right? We're going to make it look like how we want it to in a sense, right? Since the way our game works is a quiz game. We're going to ask the user some questions. We're going to have the user type in a response. Then how should we handle the user seeing if their question's answer is right? We should probably use a concept, one of the 4 concepts. Who can tell me? What is a concept we should use for an action to happen? Which one of the 4 concepts we talked about today, guys, is useful for that, for making an action call happen? Exactly, a button. So we're also going to have a button, which we click, and then we're going to have to call a function, which is then going to hold all of our code to evaluate if the user is doing something correctly or not, right? So let's get on started. So first things first, we're going to start off with creating a little header. Now what you're going to do is do a less than sign, and then I'm going to do a H1. Now H1 means it's a big header, and now you'll see what I mean. It's going to be pretty big text. And what I'm going to say is this is going to be our quiz game. And if I hit run, there we go. We see in pretty big letters, it's quiz game. For instance, if I were to change the H1 to an H10, you would see the text becomes way, way smaller. And that is because it's prioritized in HTML. The smaller the number, the bigger the text in your header. So I'm going to leave it as an H1. It's our quiz game. And there we go. So it's our quiz game now. Now we're going to need, guys, is a way for us to type in our responses. Where can we type in a response so that the user can type what they want to respond to the question with, and then a button as well. But before we get there, we have to have a place where the user's question will be displayed, right? You can't just have the user respond to blank questions. So what I'm going to do is create another header. This header is going to be a 4 one because it doesn't have to be that big. And this is going to be where the questions will be asked. Question header. And this is going to have to change eventually because it's not going to stay question header. And indeed, it's going to change as the game goes on as to what question the user will be asked. So just going to leave that with a little template text right there of question header. This will change after a little bit, though. Now what we're going to need is a text box, a place for the user to put the responses, right? So this is what I'm going to do now. This is going to be a bit of a new line of code, which we haven't really done. It's going to be something called an input tag. So same thing, I'm going to do a less than sign, then the word input. The type is going to be equal to text in quotation marks. And then I'm going to give an identifier to this text box. The reason I'm giving it an ID is because we're going to have to reference the ID in our JavaScript. And we're going to use this ID as a way to pull whatever the user puts in their text box and get that response. So I'm going to put this ID as the answer box. And then close that input off, hit run. We'll see now a text box popping up right here. And I can type on away in the text box. And now we're missing one more thing. That is a button for the action to happen, right? So say the user, this question header changes to what is, I'll make it a question actually. We'll say question number 1, who is the current president, right? For example, then the user would have to go here and then type the response of who is the president. They would put their answer right here, right? But the thing is, there's no button or something to handle what is supposed to happen when the user types in a response. So I'm going to make that button. So left-hand side, button. I'm going to give that a button identifier, once again, of set it equal to submit button, and close the button off. And then I'm going to add the text, which says submit. Like that. So now we got a place where our question will be shown to the user, the quiz game name of our project, a text box for the responses of our user, and then a button which will handle when the user types the response in. At this point, does anybody have any questions as to this HTML, whether it's the header tags, the input, or buttons? Anybody have any questions? Good. Okay. How about everybody else? Yusuf, Rashid, Yush, everybody good? All right, cool. So now, guys, we got sort of a structure, right, of our project. And in the coming weeks, we're going to spend more time with the CSS to make it look all nice and good. That's going to be something we do in the 4th week, because that's sort of something we can put off to the end. And then this today and next week, our main focus is going to be the brains of the operation, right? Now, the thing is that we don't really have a way for the user to start the game. They're just told, hey, who's the current president? So how about we also make, we could do a different button, or how about, okay, actually, you know what? Let's keep what we have. I like what we have right now. Never mind what I was talking about. We got the structure of our game, right? It's a skeleton in a sense, right? It's pretty bare bones, black and white, not much going on, but it's a structure. We got a question, and then we got a text box where the user can type a response, and then a button, which should have something, right? Now, we talked about it earlier today. What should a button be linked to? When I click a button, what should it be linked to? We talked about it today. It's one of the 4 concepts we talked about today. When we click a button, what should it be linked to, guys? Hint, hint. It's the analogy with the house. Yup, a function. So a button needs to be linked to a function, because when we click a button, it's supposed to call a function which has all of our lines of code, right? So let's go ahead and make a button, function now. So what I'm going to do is say function. Now remember, we got to name our functions and our variables in a good way so that we can remember what their purpose is. So I'm going to say this function is going to be the submit answer function. Add the opening close parentheses, then add the opening close brackets like that. There we go. So this function, guys, is now going to have the purpose of us submitting the user's answer and then evaluating, right? All right, so now we're getting more to the JavaScript, the brains of our whole operation, right? So what I'm going to do now is create a variable. This variable's purpose is going to be to hold the user's response. So what I'm going to do is say var user answer. Now this response has to be equal to whatever the user inputted in the text box, right? So all this gobbledygook, right? We wanted to hold everything the user put in the text box. And the way we do this is going to be a bit of a longer line of code. So follow along a bit carefully. So what we're going to do, guys, is do something called document dot get capital E element, capital B by, capital I ID, and then opening close parentheses. Give you guys a minute to catch up. And then in these opening close parentheses, I'm going to add some quotation marks, because we're going to get the value from our input, right? And the input was stored with an identifier called answer box. So I'm going to paste that name, answer box, in there, and then do dot value. Now this was a complex and pretty long line of code. So what's going on? Let's talk about it. So what we're doing right here, guys, is creating a variable, And that variable is going to be responsible for holding this whole document.getElementID value, all this stuff going on, right? Well, it's responsible for holding the value of whatever the user inputted into the text box. And the way we do that is getting the value from the answer box. What is the answer box? Well, the answer box is a text box. So now you kind of see the correlation, right, between our JavaScript and our HTML. Whatever the ID was of our HTML element, we're able to get whatever the value is in our JavaScript by doing the quotation marks and then the name of the text box. Does that make sense? Does that idea make sense, guys, of how the JavaScript and the HTML are related? How we can declare a text box and then get the value in the JavaScript. Does that make sense, that concept? Does that make sense, guys? Yusuf, Rashid, Maha, Yusuf, very good?
Yep.
Good, all right. All right, so now I'm telling you guys that this is gonna be responsible, this line of code, for getting the user response. Well, let's see if that's even the case, right? So let's see. How about we just alert the user's response? So let's say alert user inputted, and then I'm gonna do plus the user answer. So this is going to say user inputted, and then it's going to display me the response which the user inputted. Let's see if that's the case. I'm going to hit run. So who is the current president? Oh, if I put the answer of Joe Biden, and now if I click submit, nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Who can take a guess? When I'm clicking submit, guys, why is nothing happening? This is something we talked about last week, is a thing which I'm purposely doing right now. Why is nothing happening? Anybody have an idea? I'm clicking the button, but why is the button not going to the function? Anybody have an idea? So are they not linked or something like that? They don't. Yeah, so you're onto something, right? The reason why the function or nothing is happening right now is because the button is not linked to the function. The computer does not know, aka, that when the button is clicked, this function is supposed to be called, which is holding these lines of code. So what we have to do now is go back to our HTML, go to the button, and then add an on click. So on capital C click is going to be equal to our function name, which is submit answer. So submit answer, open and close parentheses. And the reason why we have to do this, guys, is because we have to tell the code, our computer, that, hey, when the submit button is clicked, what I want you to do is call this submit answer function in the JavaScript. And that's exactly what happens. When I click the button, the on click says go to the submit answer function, and this function will be executed. All right, so does that make sense now? And how about now if we try and go to the text box of who's the current president? If I do Joe Biden, click submit, voila. So everybody see that alert statement? The user inputted Joe Biden. Everybody see that? Yeah, great. Okay, yeah. So there we go, guys. We're sort of seeing how all this is going to start to come in play, right? I said, get the value of whatever the user input in the text box, and then alert it. Show me what the value is, and exactly that is what it is. So if I go ahead and put my own name too, my name, Rayaan Siddiqi, click submit. There we go. We can see whatever the user inputted into the text box. At this point, does anybody have any questions, any problems, any issues which they're running into with their code? Everybody good? Cool. All right. So there's the first piece of our project, right? There we go. We got the text box, we click submit, and then we grab the value of the text box. Now, the thing is, we have to do some evaluation. How do we know that the response the user put in is correct or incorrect? What concept, guys, are we going to utilize from today? So it's one of the two concepts which I introduced today. What concept are we going to use to evaluate if the user inputted a correct or incorrect response? Anybody have an idea? Yusuf, Rashid, Ayush, Mahal? It's a concept we learned about today. What concept are we going to use to evaluate if the user put in a correct or incorrect response? Oh, come on. I know you guys know this. Come on. Ayush, Rashid, Yusuf, Mahal? Anybody want to take a guess? Saying if star. If you're talking about an if statement, you are 100% correct, guys. We're going to utilize the concept of a conditional in the sense that we're going to use a condition to see if the user response, what they put in, is correct. Then we're going to say, hey, you got the question correct. Otherwise, they got the question incorrect, right? So that's what we're going to do right here. So what I'm going to do is say if, open and close parentheses, say if the user answer. Now, if the user answer, so what will be the response? Who's the current president? The current president is Joe Biden, right? So if the user answer is two equal signs, equal to open and close quotation marks, Joe Biden. And then we're going to execute some code which says right here, user answer is correct. So right here, user answer is correct. What I'm doing, guys, right here is just documenting my code. So you guys know what's going on. Now let's take a look at what this code is doing. So I'm saying if the user answer is equal to Joe Biden, then we're going to have to do some piece of code, right? And the way if statements work is if you want to do an evaluation, right, of your conditional, of your variable to something else, what you do is your variable name, then you always do two equal statements whenever you're converting something, comparing something. So when we declare a variable, we use one equal sign. If we're comparing it, we use two equal signs. Then we're saying if the user's answer is equal to Joe Biden, then what we can do is say alert, you got the question. No, you got the question right. Otherwise, if they did not answer Joe Biden, what I'm going to say is say else, opening close brackets, I'm going to alert, you got the question wrong. So before I explain anything more, how about we see how this works? So I'm going to run it. Who's the current president? If I put in Joe Biden, submit. There we go. You got the question right. Otherwise, if I enter, for instance, the previous president, Donald Trump, click submit, you got the question wrong. And then our conditional is working exactly like we expected it, right? So here, we're checking if the user answer is correct, and here checking if the user answer is wrong, aka incorrect. So does everybody understand how that works, right? In our function, which is holding all of our logic and code, guys, we get the user's response. Then we're comparing it to see if the user put in is the correct answer or not. So seeing if they put in Joe Biden, then we're saying you got the question right. Otherwise, we know that they got the question incorrect, and we're telling them you got the question wrong. Does that make sense, guys? Does that, all that logic, all that HTML, everything make sense today?
Yep.
Good to hear, good to hear, good to hear. Cool. So yeah, so that's going to be the major part which we accomplished for today with our project. We got a good start with the HTML, the structurizing of our whole project, and then getting a start of how we're going to start to tackle this. Now, next week, what we're going to do is get into more of the details, which I'll talk about in a minute. But you can save this code link if you guys are following along. But I will also post it if you got lost, need any help, so you guys can take a look at it as well, guys. So we got a good amount of the project started today and a good start overall. So now, as we're starting to think about next week, guys, next week's objective is going to be to start to unravel some more coding concepts and start to work on more of the project in the terms that we're going to add more questions. We're going to add a way to track the user score, and then talk about how can we more efficiently handle more questions. And that's going to be one of the new coding concepts for next week, guys. So at this point, if you guys have any questions, do let me know. And as always, I'm going to be active on the Google Classroom to answer any questions you guys might have. And I'm also going to post the recorded links and our project link for you guys to follow along as well. If you guys know any friends, family who are interested in computer science stuff, spread the word about the program, guys. The more the merrier. And as a reminder, next week I'll be at the Schaumburg Library talking about my book, The Switch Up, on Tuesday at 6 p.m. I'd love to see you guys there. If you guys come out there, we'd love to chat with you guys as well. Other than that, I got nothing else for you guys. Enjoy this great weather and this great rest of the day. And I'll catch you guys next week for the third week, guys. Take care. See you guys.
Bye.